Hi, this is Kogito, and I'm finally back with another Through the Ages video. Really sorry that I haven't been making videos for a long time. To be perfectly honest, I got a little burnt out of Through the Ages. I think I committed maybe the classic mistake of going into too many tournaments and playing too many games, and like I said, got pretty burnt out. For a while, I was... I didn't quit the game. I was still playing games, but I kind of didn't put so much time into them. And I didn't really, engage with the game other than just playing the games I had registered for. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past little while. But I'm feeling better. I'm feeling better now. I'm feeling more interested and more engaged in the game again. So I figure I'd like to start making videos again and see how long this lasts. No promises, but I'd like to hopefully really start them up more indefinitely in the future. This video, so before I get started in this video, and we can see it's going to be about my current World Championship group, let me just quickly go over what happened in my previous World Championship, since contrary to what I promised, I never finished videos about that. So when last we met I was involved in a group with Theanteric, Weidenbaum, and Gandon, and as we can see, I ended up finishing 4th in that group by a fair amount, especially my performance. I lost all the 2-player games. I did really badly in general. Maybe that was one reason I was feeling a little burnt out. Because this was an upper group, this did send me to one of the lower groups. Unfortunately, that lower group was also a very difficult group with 3 other extremely strong players. At least I ended up finishing 3rd in the group, but it was still enough to knock me out of the tournament. So I ended up ending in stage 5 of the World Championship. Not bad, maybe a little worse than I was hoping, but maybe that was an unrealistic expectation for my first World Championship in this game. Now in my second one, I'm hoping to at least, finish better, stage 6 at least. Obviously, I'd like to win the entire thing, but, mainly I want to sort of keep improving. Anyway, I am now, like I said, in the current World Championship. I'm in stage 2, actually. I did well enough in the previous one to be seeded automatically to stage 2, so I got to skip the first round. In this round, my opponents are Sazmer, Fat Hope, and Cleveman. So I'm going to sort of introduce them in alphabetical order, but first we can take a look at the Glico ratings. And as we can see, Sazmer does not actually have a Glico rating, so presumably this World Championship is Sazmer's first ever Through the Ages tournament, which is exciting. Fat Hope has we can see that my rating is pretty significantly higher than both my opponents. I would say not overwhelmingly so. Fat Hope in particular has a very respectable, 200th or so place or so. And I've definitely, lost to players who are, in this Glico range or lower, so definitely can't be underestimated. Cleveland lower. That being said, again, can't underestimate anyone, especially now that we're past the first round. If we take a look at their performances both in the previous round and in the previous World Championship, we can see that Cleveland finished 2nd in their round 1 group. However, we can see that another player, Sylvester, actually won every single game and ended up with 39 points. So it's looking like Sylvester is probably an extremely strong player, and Cleveland just got unlucky in being matched up against them. So I don't think we can really hold his performance against Cleveland too much. In the last year's World Championship, Cleveland did participate. They ended up dropping out in round 3. They finished actually 2nd in the group, right before Raffaello, actually. So this was another unfortunate matchup for them. So Cleveland kind of has been getting unfortunate matchups, it seems, in the World Championships. We'll see if I can continue that trend. As for Fat Hope in the previous round did finish 1st with a pretty strong 32 points, only getting 2nd in 2 games, so definitely an impressive performance. Last year, Fat Hope, oh wait, sorry, this is Sazmer. This is Fat Hope. So Fat Hope last year in the 2025 World Championship, Fat Hope, similar to Cleveland, ended up losing in round 3. Like Cleveland, finished 2nd, only by 1 point, though, against Mr. Fugu. So definitely an unfortunate result for Fat Hope. I'm sure Fat Hope, like Cleveland, is hoping to redeem themselves in this World Championship. As for Sazmer, like I said, this is Sazmer's first official tournament, so Sazmer did not participate in last year. As for the previous round, Sazmer did finish 1st, only by 1 point, though, so a pretty close group Sazmer found themselves involved in. That being said, for their presumably their first official tournament, finishing 1st in the group is always an impressive achievement. So none of my opponents can be underestimated, But without further ado, let's take a look at the first 4-player game between us. In this game I'm playing second. We can take a quick look at the leaders and wonders. In Age 3, what I noticed is there's a lot of science synergy with both Spaceflight and Manhattan Project, as well as Gates, Sid Meier, and Einstein. Pierre is always notable. There's a little bit there's Choplin, but no Hollywood. There is Gandhi potentially to hide behind, but there's also Manhattan Project to get strength without military actions, so that might be risky. In Age 2, we can see there is also both Nobel and Isaac Newton to potentially transition into one of these science strategies. There's also Robespierre to make Age 2 government stronger. There's 2 theater leaders, but not that much theater payoff, as we saw. There is, however, James Cook plus the Suez, always a combat to keep in mind. James Watt, also another leader to keep in mind. In Age 1, I like to see how many leaders are transition leaders, how many like to get elected early, how many like to get elected late. Most of these leaders would kind of prefer to be elected early, with the possible exception of Barbarossa. Only 1 military action Age 1 leader, notably. There are, however, a bunch of strong Age 1 wonders. Sazmer playing first is a little unfortunate. Can't pick any leaders or wonders, or even the engineering genius, so it's kind of stuck picking the urban growth. I, however, have a much more interesting decision to make between Hammurabi and Engineering Genius. Both of these are very strong cards, obviously. One of the strongest leaders, one of the strongest AG yellow card. Normally, I would probably pick Hammurabi here. I really like him. However, there are a few considerations against him. We can see 2 of the major ones here in the row already. Hammurabi, when paired up against both of these military leaders, can definitely get dicey depending on how things go, especially if one of them also gets Colossus, which seems possible. Well, Colossus probably wouldn't get picked, but maybe Sazmer, for example, could get both Colossus and one of these potentially. That would be pretty dangerous. In addition, as we saw, there's the Suez in the game. There's no Columbus, but there's Isabella. There's a pretty good amount of colonization synergy, which also makes Hammurabi worse. If there weren't a better card to take than the Engineering Genius, I probably would still take Hammurabi, but given these, it's kind of a, like I said, especially these 2 leaders, as well as Colossus, seems to be a bad Hammurabi game. I decided to go with the Engineering Genius instead. Fat Hope does take Hammurabi as well as an Aguila card, which, again, a little dicey, but especially with the urban growth, I think that's definitely valid. Cleveland, interestingly, values Caesar over Sun Tzu. I think Sun Tzu is a significantly better leader than Caesar, but that might be a contested opinion. If you think Caesar is better, obviously this is the right play. Age 1 begins. Sazmer takes Sun Tzu over Ashoka. That is, I think, a valid opinion, especially when playing first. Notably, chooses to... Unfortunately, because Sun Tzu was only available for 2 civil actions, Sazmer is unable to both elect him, build the lab, choose the lab over the mine, and take Colossus, which Sazmer probably would have wanted Colossus here. That's the way it goes sometimes. However, I... just like Sazmer, I'm also kind of forced to take a leader for 2 civil actions. Aside from this choice, though, my turn is a little interesting. Basically, we can see what I end up doing, which I think is a mistake in retrospect, which is instead of taking one of these wonders, probably Colossus, I chose to pop instead. My logic was, I felt that it seemed likely that I would be able to get a wonder next turn for 1 civil action, potentially a better wonder. Now, none of my opponents have taken a wonder, so maybe it's likely that the Roman roads, library, and pyramids will all be taken. But still felt it still felt likely to me again that at the very least I would get one of these next turn. And since Sazmer drew 4 cards in Sun Tzu, it felt reasonably likely that Sazmer might cede. Now, on the other hand, Sazmer doesn't have a free population, so maybe they wouldn't, but I felt like they probably would, and I wanted the free population for development of warfare or religion. All that being said, as we'll see the game develop, I think this was the wrong decision to pop here, and I should have taken Colossus instead. Of course, I popped over electing Ashoka, because electing Ashoka does nothing for me this turn. I draw a Trader's Agreement and a bonus card. Fat Hope elects Hammurabi, selects the Roman roads, definitely the best wonder here, especially with Hammurabi. The best wonder available for 1 civil action, especially with Hammurabi. However, that does result, we can see here, where Fat Hope ends up taking the cultural heritage. And Fat Hope taking this ends up making things pretty bad for me because it means that the Colossus will be discarded on Cleveman's turn and the Hanging Gardens will be discarded on Sazmer's turn. So if Cleveman and Sazmer take the pyramids in the library, spoiler alert, they will, I will be left without an AJ Wonder. I was not considering this cultural heritage play from Fat Hope, which is why I didn't take a Wonder last turn. So I definitely should have known that, which is why, like I said, I think that was a pretty major mistake of mine. Maybe I'm still, you know, I didn't spend enough time on that turn. Anyway, Cleveland values the pyramids for an extra civil action over the library, elects Caesar, and builds a mine. Sazmer Seeds reveals development of settlement, so my increase in my population ended up not even really mattering. And takes the library over the Hanging Gardens, obviously, leaving me without any AJ Wonders. At the very least, there are a bunch of powerful Age 1 Wonders, which was another reason I did that play last turn. I figured that even on the chance that I wouldn't get an AJ Wonder, at least there are several powerful Age 1 Wonders I could take as my first Wonder. I still think it was the wrong play, though. Anyway. Sazmer does take the rich land. Kinda had no choice with the development of settlement being revealed. Probably better than the drama, but taking an AJ rich land when you've already built your third mine is not a situation you want to be in, for sure. Now, I do end up offering this trade routes agreement. Why don't we take a look at my turn first, and you'll see why. Where, basically on this turn, I decided to settle where I was going, what I was going to do with Age 1. I think there are several several potential options here, including, of course, taking the iron. I am not in corruption right now, so I could, for instance, take the iron and maybe Leonardo. Although Leonardo, without having the alchemy in hand, is a little risky. I could take the iron, maybe on the drama printing press, but that also seemed kind of bad. So even though normally taking the iron seems good, if I wanted to get the full Ashoka bonus this turn, it would be a little awkward. Maybe I don't necessarily need the full Ashoka bonus. I could just take the iron and build a lab, for example, and get the rock Ashoka bonus. But I felt there was a line that was more powerful for me, which was taking Leonardo and the printing press. So there isn't that much printing press synergy in the deck. There's a little bit with Shakespeare and Gotti, but not much Age 3 payoff, or really any. Well, Einstein. There's Einstein to potentially upgrade the printing press into a multimedia. But I do think the printing press is quite strong with Leonardo. Obviously, Leonardo giving you the extra science with it, at least while he's your leader. This also obviously gives me the full Ashoka bonus this turn, but it also gives me a pretty clear path to next turn, basically getting rid of Ashoka. Ashoka can be hard to maintain the full bonus for, obviously it's powerful if you can, but Leonardo would kind of give me the equivalent, almost, sort of. Would give me sort of 1 rock per turn, almost, and 1 science per turn. Maybe not, especially since the rock isn't guaranteed per turn, maybe not quite as good as Ashoka, but pretty close. It doesn't require me to, you know, have that hand, have 3 colors of cards in my hands. So that was one reason I did this play, to have a clear path to replacing Ashoka soon, but it's also because I think, in general, Leonardo and Printing Press is quite strong. I'm getting both of those cards for 1 civil action right next to each other, so this just seemed to me a generally powerful thing to do, and even though there's not that much Printing Press synergy, it still seemed good. Doing this play, though, does leave me with 1 civil action left to pick. I didn't really want to take the reserves with it. The drama, there's not really any. I mean, there's a little bit of drama synergy with St. Peter's Basilica, but wasn't enough for me to take it. But that's why I wanted to offer the Traders Agreement, to use 1 rock as 1 food on my turn, because it means that for my last civil action, I can use it very efficiently and just increase my population. So, because of that, that's why I offered the Traders Agreement. As for why I offered to Cleveland, I was looking at my opponents. I figured Sazmer, who might want to use rocks for food, who might want to use food for rocks, because I'm using rocks for food. Sazmer, I thought probably would be least likely to accept the pact, because they've already gone into consumption a little bit. Fat Hope has the Roman roads to delay consumption a little bit, and Cleveland didn't pop last turn either. So it's sort of between Fat Hope and Cleveland. I think it probably didn't matter who I picked. I figured both would probably accept, but I think that it seemed to me that Fat Hope had the stronger strat than Cleveland, with Hammurabi plus Roman roads, even with the 2 military leaders, whereas Cleveland did have the pyramids, but their turns were a little inefficient, and Caesar, I think, is the worst of these 4 leaders, so that's why I picked Cleveland in the end. Fat Hope takes Nostradamus for protection once the event deck flips. Is able to, now downside of my play is Fat Hope is able to get the Iron for 1 civil action, but that's the way it goes sometimes. And then chooses to play the Culture Heritage, and instead of building a lab, is a little more civil action efficient and builds 2 stages of the Roman roads first. I think that's an entirely sensible choice. Cleveman seeds once, reveals development of religion, and seeds a second time with Caesar, revealing development of trade routes. Cleveman builds 1 stage of the pyramids instead of building the lab, valuing that more. But notably chooses to take both the irrigation and the knights instead of, say, building another stage of pyramids. I think that with Cleveman delaying the lab, it becomes a little dicey to be taking 2 techs, I think. On the other hand, these are definitely both pretty strong techs. Irrigation, especially getting it early. Knights, you know, especially if Cleveland has a cavalry tactic, but even if they don't, always good to have knights in hand. So I think this is also a defensible play, for sure. Cleveland just has to be worried about not clogging their hand with techs. Anyway, Sazmar Seeds reveals development of civil life, takes cartography and Isabella, so that definitely suggests Sazmar is seeded at least 1 colony, perhaps 2. And with playing this cartography here and building a war to get out of corruption, that really strongly suggests that Sazmar has seeded at least 1 colony. But maybe Sazmar also wanted the strength. So the Traders Agreement had pretty much accomplished what I wanted it to, so I decided to replace it with the Naval Trade Agreement, because I figured I probably wouldn't be using the Traders Agreement anymore. I think, is it called Traders Agreement? Whatever. I decided to offer the Naval Trade Agreement to Fat Hope. I figured offering to Fat Hope made more sense than offering it to Cleveman. I chose to give myself, because it's canceling the fact with Cleveman, I chose to give myself the +1 colonization. I have the colonization card in hand, and I figured it couldn't hurt to at least offer a bit more competition to Sazmar. Decided to take this Magic Castle. I think it'll be a useful wonder for me to compete in strength against these 2 strength leaders, and also obviously I have a lot of rocks now. There'll be a way to efficiently spend those rocks. This is the turn I decided to, like I said, replace Ashoka. I'm going to end up only having 1 color of 2 colors of cards in my hand, so I figured just replace him now, not have to worry about that, get the Leonardo bonus going instead. As for my final civil action, I decided to actually not take any cards in Battle Stage with the Magic Castle. Definitely, I think taking the Warfare or the Frugality could be perfectly defensible here. I did this play partly because just to stay efficient with my civil actions. I think that even though both these cards can be useful, I thought Frugality maybe... I'm always not sure how helpful Frugality will be in Age 1 like this when, you know, you don't know if the food will actually get you an extra population or not. It kind of depends on the event deck and stuff. As for the Warfare, I just felt that with the Magic Castle, I was feeling pretty safe in terms of strength, so I didn't think that the Warfare was necessary. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that was my logic. Oh, and I chose to offer the Pact instead of seeding Raiders, because even with the Magic Castle, against these 2 strength leaders, I wasn't sure would be able to not be hit by Raiders. I dropped Border Conflict, and thankfully a Tactic, and an Infantry Tactic at that, which is nice, because I'm not sure if I'll be able to get Knights. 3 of my civil actions were set with Himeji Castle and building the printing press, so I wasn't able to take the Knights this turn. Fat Up takes the Monarchy, obviously powerful with Hammurabi, does builds that second lab and finish with the Roman roads this turn, and increases the population, definitely a strong turn from them. Cleveland seeds. Oh, I forgot to mention what I used my development of civil life for. I used it to increase my population. I think that was the only thing I could use it for. Well, no, I think I could use it for printing press, but obviously I wanted to play printing press with Leonardo, so. Anyway. And Cleveland's seeds again, revealing development of planning. The choices of development of planning being science, crafts, and politics. Flipping the event deck. Cleveland finishes pyramids, takes iron, builds a second lab. Seems like a good turn. Sazmar seeds, revealing a cultural influence. Pretty neutral event. I get 1 more culture than my opponents. Increase the population, builds a 3rd farm, notably. Plays Isabella, It looks like Sazmer got pretty unlucky and didn't draw a tactic, or at least didn't draw a tactic they wanted to upgrade. So that's pretty unfortunate for Sazmer. Is at least able to take the Code of Laws and play it. With the library, they should have enough science to play the Code of Laws. It will delay their next technology a bit, though. And takes a Knights. I decided to go ahead and seed the border conflict. First of all, obviously, you know, I'm not weakest right now, and I felt that even though I wasn't sure I would be able to be strongest, I should at least be able to avoid being weakest. And I revealed a rat, so a little bit of a surprising event to reveal, perhaps, because people still had a lot of food. That being said, at least, you know, I lost 2 food, which is annoying, but everyone else lost at least that much. I'd hope last 1 more, so overall, a relatively neutral event to reveal at this stage. I decided to build a warrior and finish the Himeji Castle to make me strongest now. With my remaining 3 civil actions, then I decided to go ahead and upgrade an irrigation. Irrigation, you know, pretty good. It's still, you know, about halfway through age 1, so I think it's still early enough for irrigation to put in a fair amount of work when they get it going this turn. And with Ocean Liner Service and Statue of Liberty in the deck, it's a pretty good irrigation deck. I also didn't really feel like I had anything else I wanted to do this turn. St. Peter's Basilica, I felt with me not having irons until ever, or at least until the end of age 1, and with me not having a happy face window to pair with it, St. Peter's Basilica didn't seem too great. I don't want the alchemies, obviously. I didn't want to spend 3 civil actions for the bread and circuses. Didn't want the alchemies because I have the printing press already. And I didn't really want any of these yellow cards, so the irrigation just seemed like the best card on the row for me to take, and I can upgrade a farm this turn even, which seemed good. And I also played the Legion. Just to get out of my hand, I figured there's a good chance I might want to see the Raiders next turn. I wanted to keep the bonus card too, obviously. And I saw no reason to keep the Legion a secret. Especially with, I think, all of my opponents, or 2 of my opponents, pick Knights, yeah. Anyway, Fat Hope does the Revolution with Hammurabi and elects as Hammurabi's final act before being replaced by Nostradamus, and is able to use the final civil action to upgrade a mine, so strong turn. Cleveman upgrades farms themselves and takes Barbarossa with them, so that makes a lot of sense to value the farms over to value the irrigation over the iron, I think. I think that was right. And chooses to take a patriotism as well, instead of, say, playing the iron or the knights. So maybe they have a plan for this patriotism. Foreshadowing. Sazmer Seeds reveals a historic territory. Unfortunately, I'm not able to bid too much for it. I wasn't willing to put 2 units into it. Maybe I could have tried bidding 4, just in case Sazmer, you know, just to maybe try to leech a bonus card off of Sazmer. But I felt that if Sazmer only bid 3, which was at least a, you know, a possibility with this being a less value colony, if I had bid 4 and been forced to give up both my warriors to it, that would have been really bad for me. So wasn't willing to take that risk and only bid 3. So Sazmer is able to win with just a warrior, unfortunately. Sazmer then takes the alchemy and finishes the Library of Alexandria and takes a breakthrough, so good turn. I'm still strongest, so I went ahead and seeded the Raiders, revealed a rebellion, which hits nobody. I definitely wanted the swordsman here, you know, with my Legion tactic. And I decided to go ahead and build a swordsman, thus really increasing my strength a lot, putting pressure on my opponents. As for my last civil action, I went with the bread and circuses. In retrospect, I think, especially now that I know that I'm getting irrigations, I think at Frugality I should have considered much more strongly than I ended up doing. In retrospect, it probably would have been right to take. Now, the reason I took the bread and circuses was not just because it's a happy face solution, but I felt that there's a decent amount of synergy with Gaudi in the deck. I'm quite well set up for Gaudi right now, so I think that was one of the major reasons I took the bread and circuses. As well as Pierre, decent amount of synergy. That being said, it's probably not necessary, especially since I literally just revealed Rebellion. I probably could afford to just skip the age 1 happy face solution, wait for an age 2 happy face solution. There's also both of the theologies left in the deck, although one of my opponents might take them. And the Frugality could obviously be pretty strong, with me definitely being able to use it well with the irrigations. So, in retrospect, I think I should have taken the Frugality instead. And I drew a Phalanx. Fat Hope sees reveal scientific breakthrough. That's pretty good for me. I get as much as Sasmer does, one more than the other two opponents. Fat Hope takes a breakthrough for 2 civil actions as well as an alchemy, and then plays the alchemy and upgrades 1. Fat Hope choosing... So, the cost of this breakthrough was not being able to upgrade another one of these buildings. I think that cost probably was too high. If I was Fat Hope, I probably would have taken the Rich Land for 1 less civil action. I do agree the breakthrough is usually a stronger yellow card than the Rich Lands, but I think not strong enough to be worth 1 more civil action. Especially in this situation, but that's just me. Fat Hope also plays the Fighting Band as well as building a Warrior to compete well in strength. Now we can see Cleveland's plan with the Patriotism, where after electing Barbarossa, Cleveland is able to build 2 knights with Barbarossa. And next turn, Cleveland will be able to build the 3rd and finish this heavy cavalry tactic. So next turn, Cleveland is definitely going to be pretty threatening. Cleveland also takes 2 rich lands for this iron. Maybe the engineering genius could have been better than the rich land. On the other hand, if Cleveland is not planning on taking a wonder, the rich land obviously, you know, is going to be used much earlier than the engineering genius was. So this was probably the right play. Frugality, not as good for Barbarossa, obviously. Now we can see Sasmer building that 3rd farm a couple turns ago. Obviously, Sasmer got unlucky that the rest got revealed. That being said, ends up definitely not working out for them, where they have to destroy it immediately to build the knights. Sasmer takes the engineering genius as well as an iron. So, given this, that Sasmer had to do this for the knights, I think this is a fine play from Sasmer. Sasmer is perhaps vulnerable to an aggression from me. Unfortunately, I do not have an aggression. As for me, this turn was essentially a choice between Great Wall and Code of Laws. We'll say I ended up picking Code of Laws. Unfortunately, if I play Code of Laws this turn, I'll get 1 more rock from Leonardo, which means that even by upgrading both of these warriors to swordsmen, I will not be out of corruption, and I will have just enough civil actions to take the Great Wall and do nothing else. So essentially, the only way I can both take Code of Laws and play it this turn and take Great Wall is to be in corruption. So my choice was sort of, I mean, I could have maybe taken the Code of Laws and not played it this turn and then just taking Great Wall. That, however, seemed pretty bad, especially with the risk of Dark Ages, potentially. Dark Ages, definitely, well, my opponents aren't really playing around it that much, but they also, Fat Hope in particular, doesn't really have much of an opportunity to, so always a possibility. But really, I think the choices, this choice is coming down to Code of Laws or Great Wall. And I think both of them are definitely extremely strong cards, and I think there are pros and cons to each. I can definitely see another player picking the Great Wall here instead, and it working out quite well for them. In retrospect, maybe Great Wall is a bit better. I think ultimately the reason I picked Code of Laws was because I felt that even without getting Great Wall, I can still get maybe this Universitas, maybe the Forbidden City later, and I felt both of those wonders were also very strong, probably at about the same level as Great Wall, maybe a little bit worse, but only a little bit, and so I figured Code of Laws plus one of those wonders was better than Great Wall without the Code of Laws. It is quite close, though. Especially with me being on an infantry tactics, Great Wall is very strong for me. And especially with Fat Hope being on infantry tactics, Great Wall is pretty strong for them. Of course, Fat Hope, with Fat Hope being on Monarchy, the Code of Laws would also be strong for them. So either card leaving to Fat Hope would have been bad. So I'm not sure if one is, but necessarily stronger than the other. Okay, I think I've discussed that choice enough. Anyway, with me taking Code of Laws, I decided I can get out of corruption by upgrading a farm and increasing our population. I didn't want this drama. I also decided to go ahead and upgrade both swordsmen using my military actions in Age 1 and not Age 2. Fat Hope sees with Nostradamus reveals developed territory. I am, I think, willing to bid 4. With Swordsman, I'm able to bid 4, so I'm able to at least leech 1 rock off of Sazmer with that. I wasn't willing to put 2 population. Again, I wasn't willing to risk 2 Swordsmen. Anyway, Fat Hope does indeed take the Great Wall. I think that's definitely the right choice. I'll take the Swordsman. Notably, Fat Hope chooses to prioritize the Great Wall over upgrading the economy. I probably would have upgraded the economy, especially with Nostradamus and Monarchy offering a pretty decent amount of protection. However, I can definitely understand prioritizing the Great Wall instead. Age 2 begins. Cleveland finishes their tactic by using Barbarossa's ability. Unfortunately, to get out of Uprising, Cleveland has to disband a warrior. Cleveland is also able to upgrade a mine with that rich land, and able to take another rich land. So all 3 of these mine upgrades will be with rich lands, which is not something you see very often. Cleveland also chooses to take a monarchy, perhaps planning to do a revolution soon. Sazuma doesn't see being weakest, instead builds a knights. Unfortunately, and seems they have their own heavy cavalry tactic. Fortunately, they're missing 1 population to get that 3rd knight. Again, leaving themselves open to an aggression from me, potentially, except I believe that, yes, they do play a warfare to at least get 1 draw, and to be more safe from aggressions from both me and Cleveland. Although, again, I don't actually have an aggression. And they also develop iron instead of taking one of these cards. Unfortunately, because Cleveland spent the civil actions on the warfare, they were not able to take this Universitas, which definitely seems like it would be good for them. However, even if Sazmer had taken the Universitas, I probably would have taken the Forbidden City, so I would have been okay. On my turn, I decide to build up Bed and Circuses. We can see, even though I think it was probably a mistake and I should have taken Fregali instead, at least I can do this with it, and it enables me to become strongest, as we can see. My remaining 3 civil actions, I go and take the Universitas. Especially with me knowing there's a border conflict in this deck, I really wanted to become strongest to potentially win that border conflict, and that border conflict would allow me to finish the Universitas even as soon as next turn, because I am taking the knights here. This was, I will say, a bit of a complicated turn for me to decide what I wanted to do, because I kind of had 3 things I wanted to do. I wanted to build this arena to become strongest, I wanted to take the Universitas, and I wanted to take a cavalryman, which is obviously a significantly better tech than the knights if you can do it. And with taking the knights here, I expected that both of the cavalrymen would be gone by my next turn, which is why I took the knights. Even though I don't really need it, I'm not really planning to move on to phalanx. Obviously, any H2 tactic I draw that requires knights, this will be useful for. While I would have preferred the cavalryman, I'm missing 1 civil action for the cavalryman instead of the knights. And like I said, I valued becoming strongest and taking the Universitas over the cavalryman. Another advantage of the knights, which I wish I could say that I knew when I made this, I had in mind when I made this play, but I think I didn't, but I should have, is that we can see I'll have 5 rocks next turn. If border conflict is revealed, that will give me 8 rocks, and I'll have just enough signs to play knights, but not cavalryman. And playing the knights will give me the 9th rock that I can use to finish Universitas next turn. So I think that's, with that consideration in mind, I think this is definitely the right play, because it leaves me open to that very strong turn next turn. And I am immediately rewarded for taking the knights too by drawing this Napoleonic army tactic. Fat Hope seizes Nostradamus, reveals the raiders that I had seeded previously. Fortunately, Fat Hope is hit by it, as well as Sazmer. However, Fat Hope is still able to finish the Great Wall now, as well as upgrade 2 warriors to swordsmen, thus making them compete pretty well in strength. They also take one of those copies of Cavalryman. Interestingly, they take this one and not this one. But I think it is certainly right to take it. Cleveland seats, and that border conflict is indeed revealed, so definitely I was very glad to become the strongest last turn. Cleveland finishes upgrading their mines and then takes that Forbidden City. I think it's definitely a very strong wonder for them here, with them having some happy face issues. And they don't need the theology now with the Forbidden City, so they take the second copy of Cavalryman. Even though they have knights already, Cavalryman obviously, you know, can use for age 3 tactics, so always nice to have. Sazuma does not seed. Instead, they are able to build a knight. They're able to build this knight because that border conflict that I won, Sazuma lost. And we can see here that in some cases, losing a border conflict, you know, you don't want to, usually, but sometimes it can be an odd upside here. With Sazuma probably wanted to destroy something to build this knight anyway, so that they could finish their tactic. And so the border conflict kind of let them do that without spending a civil action. Well, not kind of, it did let them do that without spending a civil action. It is kind of interesting to me, though, that Sazuma chose to destroy a mine and not this temple, where they did not need the second happy face right now. If I was Sazuma, I probably would have destroyed this temple instead. Anyway, Sazuma is able to upgrade one of the mines, as well as taking journalism and the selective breeding. Selective breeding, I think, definitely a card they want soon. Journalism over Rifleman is more questionable to me. Well, okay, never mind. They take the Rifleman too. I probably would have taken the efficient upgrade over the journalism for this mine upgrade if I were in Sazuma's position. But the journalism could definitely do some work for them. It means that they... Anyway, moving on. As I mentioned last turn, because the Buddha Comics was revealed, I'm able to play the Knights for an extra rock and finish the Universalis immediately. This seems so strong to me that I felt like it was clearly what I wanted to do with my first 4 civil actions. But that does leave me with kind of a choice to make with my last civil action. Namely, do I want this Rifleman or do I want this efficient upgrade? I think there are arguments for both. The efficient upgrade is, I think, the more immediately obvious one because I am the player who will be on coal. Efficient upgrade will obviously make coal a lot easier to upgrade into. On the other hand, Rifleman is one of the most important Age 2 technologies, in my opinion, because when it comes to the Age 3 military techs, right, the modern infantry is the most expensive. So, because you need either Rifleman or modern infantry to use Age 3 tactics with infantry, you often, you know, want one of them. And, like I said, of these 3, the modern infantry is the one you want the least because it costs the most science. I also felt that the Rifleman was quite strong for Fat Hope. So it's a bit of, as well as Cleveland, obviously, who Sazuma already took the first copy of Rifleman. So with me taking the second, Cleveland will not be able to use any infantry tactics for a while. And Fat Hope can't upgrade their swordsman either. So for those reasons, I ended up choosing the Rifleman. I felt that with Leonardo, I felt reasonably confident that I should be able to upgrade coals pretty easily, even without the efficient upgrades. All that being said, though, in retrospect, I think this was probably a mistake and the efficient upgrade would have been better. Anyway, I ended up tossing one of my bonus cards. I felt that Sazuma, it felt pretty unlikely for me to be able to seriously compete with Sazuma in colony bidding. And I felt the developed territory was just a strong card to keep, just in case, you know, I decided to get the Suez. It would at least be a really strong territory to pair with Suez. And I wanted to keep this tactic, obviously. And I draw 2 more strong territories. Fat Hope Seeds reveals a strategic territory. I decide to pass on it because I was very confident I could not win, and I didn't want to reveal to my opponents that I didn't have any bonus cards. Sazuma at least has to pay a little bit more for this one. Fat Hope increases the population, takes the efficient upgrade, and takes the Eiffel Tower. Kind of interesting choice to take this, you know, obviously passing up this mine upgrade to do it. Well, I probably would have, so I guess Fat Hope could have upgraded the mine and just not increased the population. Although are they building a, yeah, they're building a warrior though, so maybe they wanted this warrior. Taking the Eiffel Tower, interesting decision with not having that strong rock income. That being said, I actually have kind of feel that the Eiffel Tower is a bit underrated in some ways. I think that getting a happy face on your wonder is really strong, most notably, so I'm not entirely opposed to this line. Clearman Seeds reveals a vast territory. I tried bidding a little bit on it. I think I bid 3 to sorta, kinda suggest maybe I have a bonus card or something, but I guess I don't really, because I'm just bidding a swordsman. Maybe I could have bid a bit more. Regardless, though, Sazmor wins, obviously. And with this, Sazmor has 4 colonies already, which is a little bit frightening, especially with Cook Sewers in this deck. Cleveland finishes their wonder, takes strategy, seems like a good turn to me. Sazmor Seas, despite being weakest, reveals a new deposits, which is worse for me than for my opponents. Sazmor increases their population 2 times, rebuilds their army because they had to send 2 knights away to get those 2 colonies, making Sazmor strongest. And Sazmor plays the selective breeding to get it to free up hand space for the switch land for these upgrades. And also for the richland and the reserves. So Sazmor definitely needs rocks, so I think this is an understandable play. Maybe the wave of nationalism could have been considered, but Sazmor is also having some hand size issues. Reserves is obviously easier to play for value than wave of nationalism, especially with Sazmor being strongest right now. So understandable selection. I don't see any colonies into Sazmor. However, I was pretty happy to see Robespierre here. With Robespierre available and this Republic, I am able to immediately fix perhaps my biggest issue right now, aside from needing coals, which is my civil actions. Not only that, though, as we can see, this will leave me with exactly 7 sides next turn, which is enough for the coal next turn. After I increase my population 2 times and build an arena to get out of corruption. I chose the arena because I chose to build the arena here because I knew I would need the happy faces eventually, and like I said, I needed to spend my rock somehow to get out of corruption. But that also leaves me with just enough civil actions to take this coal. So I think this is definitely the best thing to do, and Robespierre does what he often does, which is in 1 turn significantly improve your position. So definitely a lucky card draw for me here. Discard the vast territory seemed as it's, I think, the worst territory among these 3. The vast territory 1 is better than developed territory 1, but I think developed territory 2, giving you 2 yellows, and as well as the science, makes it stronger. Fat Hope takes Nobel, definitely seems like a good leader for them, and interestingly is valuing the Eiffel Tower over the economy upgrades. That, I think, is the wrong choice. Fat Hope is able to take the wave of nationalism, though, which should be good for them, as well as the selective breeding. I, of course, passed up the selective breeding. Fat Hope also chooses to adopt my Legion tactic, basically sacrificing 2 card draws for 1 strength. That is an exchange that I'm not sure I would take, frankly. Fat Hope doesn't seem to taking the Louvre, so both of these opponents are choosing to take these high culture wonders, notably. Cleveland is also able to get a 4th knight with Barbarossa, thus having all 3 of us here being on 12 strength exactly, and builds 2 stations of the Louvre, as well as taking a Republic. Alright, turn overall. I am getting a little... I'm not sure about taking the Republic here with the monarchy already. I mean, the Republic is, of course, quite good at the strategy, so that's also defensible. Guess it's probably better than anything else Cleveland could have done with their civil actions. Sazmor Seeds is strongest, revealing Call to Arms. Thankfully, I am not hit by it. Sazmor upgrades 1 farm, takes James Cook. Obviously, an extremely strong leader, with Sazmor already having 4 colonies. And potentially having seeded more too. I'm definitely not seeding any of my colonies. And upgrades their final mine. Obviously, I want to upgrade a coal, and with none of my opponents having taken the ocean liner service, I was very happy to take it myself. This, I think, is a pretty set series of actions, so that the question now is just what to do with my remaining 3 civil actions. That question, I think, however, is also pretty clear, which is take this copy of cannons that was just revealed for me. I didn't really, you know, I am out of science, only have 4 science income, so I don't really want to take any techs I don't have strong plans to really use. The cannon obviously is necessary for my tactic, really important card for me. The frugality not so useful with me being an ocean line of service, so overall I think this turn is pretty clear what to do. I draw a bonus card of Prosperity, a suitable event for me, and a tactic I probably won't use. Although I could potentially use it to not play cannons. Pedo proceeds revealing Barbarians. Unfortunately, this does hit me. If I had seeded last turn, it wouldn't have hit me, so maybe I should have seeded, but I think seeding one of these into James Cook, with me not having any bonus cards at the time, felt really dangerous. Anyway, Fat Hope, again, prioritizes the Eiffel Tower over economy upgrades. But with the efficient upgrade, is at least able to upgrade one of these mines. Doesn't take any of these cards in the row. None of them. Maybe the Justice System should have been taken by Fat Hope, though. Cleveland finishes Louvre. Takes Newton. Newton will definitely help getting these techs out of the hand. Takes Kanman. This one I'm definitely not convinced by. Already having a Republic in the hand. Cleveland is now kind of stuck in their hand with a lot of techs, and even though they have Newton, they don't actually have the scientific methods yet, so this seems pretty dangerous to me on Cleveland's end. And you can see already, they end up floating one civil action, never a place you want to be. Sasmer builds journalism, so that journalism that we take, even though I wasn't sure about this, is starting to become useful for Sasmer. With Cook plus 4 colonies and this journalism, Sasmer is up to 9 cultural production, which is a lot. And takes an urban growth, probably for another journalism. And the weakest I don't want to seed. Instead I build a knight to take me to be not weakest. I didn't have enough rocks to upgrade a mine anyway. That is pretty much all I can use my resources for in my civilization, though. So with my remaining civil actions, I kind of have to take cards. As for the cards to take, again, I think that's pretty clear, and because most of these attacks I don't really want. I don't have a lot of science. So I take the Engineering Genius and the Revolutionary Idea. AG, obviously, immediately useful on my Wonder. I can potentially finish my Wonder next turn, or maybe value coal mines instead, but regardless, it'll be very useful for me very quickly. Revolutionary Idea will fix my currently biggest issue, which is my science. Again, I don't know this frugality. The patriotism could definitely be useful for me, though. This does leave me with 1 civil action left, and really not anything I particularly want to do. I do end up choosing to take the opera, though. There is at least Charlie Chapman in the deck for opera synergy. I felt it was pretty unlikely I would want the opera, but not impossible. And with me having 8 civil actions, I wasn't really worried about hand space. You know, all of these yellow cards I can get out of my hand pretty quickly, so I didn't think I had any hand space issues, and the opera could at least potentially be useful. So that, and again, I really had nothing else to spend this civil action on. Because I'm playing against Cook, I decided to go ahead and discard all of these colonies. I think I even discarded... Right, I discarded the colonies, and I decided to discard the Conquistadors too. Even though I could potentially use Conquistadors to not have to play cannon, I had already taken the cannon, and I figured... And the Napoleonic army is just a significantly better tactic than the Conquistadors. And I draw an aggression. Finally, I think this is the first aggression I drew this game, as well as a tactic I am quite likely not going to use. But I was able to get full value off of the Wave of Nationalism, or I guess almost, because I think they only built that cavalryman with it. They also take an architecture. They do have a lot of science for it. Unfortunately, the architecture is taken after the Eiffel Tower was completed. And they choose to upgrade the farm over the mine. Cleveland does a Newton Revolution with the Kanmon. And builds a Knights. And increases the population to get out of corruption. So even though they got Louvre without any blue cubes, I think they've largely managed to avoid corruption so far. Well, except for the previous turn, I guess. Never mind. Sazmer, unfortunately, is able to take Suez. I mean, no one else in any colonies whatsoever, so it makes sense no one else wanted to take it, which is a kind of from Sazmer. But obviously, Sazmer is going to be able to get a lot of value off of it. Uses the Engineering Genius 1 before the age is out, and increases the population as their final civil action, well, and builds a Knights to compete the strength more. I decide to upgrade mines before finishing Ocean Liner Service, because, you know, you can finish Ocean Liner Service, but if you don't have the rocks to use with the population, there's not that much point. I don't see it because I'm weakest, and I plan on fixing that this turn. After taking the breakthrough to help my science situation more. I guess I don't fix it this turn, but yeah, I don't want to see it yet, even though this will be a pretty good event for me. I want to slow play the event deck as much as possible while I'm weakest. And I think next turn I had a plan to not be weakest anymore, potentially. I spend 5 solo actions on these 2 breakthroughs. Again, I don't want the Frugality, and I don't want any of these... I mean, a lot of these cards I already have, and I don't want the ones that I don't, so... I basically had nothing else to do with my civil actions. That's one of the weaknesses of having a lot of civil actions, and then it's like, well, I spend all my resources just upgrading to coal. H3 begins. Fat Hope Seeds reveals an immigration. I didn't see that, but it does hit me, so that's nice. Fat Hope takes a cannon, plays the architecture, sort of preemptively, not using it this turn, and finishes upgrading the farm, and then takes the Frugality. Cleveland Seeds reveals a wealthy territory. I'm able to bid a fair amount for it, but I don't think anyone was going to be bidding Sazmer here. At least Sazmer had to put... looks like Sazmer has used up all their winners cards, though, so they had to invest a fair amount into it. Cleveland takes the Organized Religion to fix the Happy Face situation. Builds a 3rd lab in order to get exactly 6 science next turn for this scientific method, so I think that was smart. And takes the final copy of Cannons, as well as an Opera. Unfortunately, Cleveland is kind of stuck in the situation where they just had enough science to do these things and had to take this tech over the yellow card. But we can see here that Cleveland is now has a hand set full of techs with only 3 science income right now. We'll presumably get more soon, but still not a situation you want to be in. At the beginning of Age 3 now, we can take a look at how everyone is doing. The culture situation, we can see Sazmer, me, and Fat Hope are all about the same. Sazmer has the most cultural income, followed by Fat Hope, but again, I'm not that far behind. I have 5 culture income thanks to my 2 wonders and this printing press, which has been doing steady work for me throughout the game. In terms of civil actions, obviously, I and Cleveland have by far the most compared to our opponents. So that's a huge advantage on us, as well as this Ocean Liner Service will be helpful for me when I finish it. And then Sazmer, despite having lost that mine, is going to be able to make up for it with the Suez Canal soon. A very, very strong Suez Canal, as we can see, plus Cook, so that'll be scary. As for science, that's about the same for everyone. Rocks, I will soon have the most rock income, but obviously it took me a while to upgrade my coal mines. Overall, the economies, you know, in terms of resource production, look pretty similar, at least, as I said, once Sazmer finishes their Suez Canal. Sazmer and I will have a bit more than our opponents, at least. It looks to me like the civil action gap is the most significant right now. But overall, I don't think there's that huge a difference between any of the players. No one is very obviously in 1st or in 4th to me right now. You know, Cleveland has the least culture, but more civil actions, so I think it's a relatively even game. I mean, Fat Hope does have a lot of science saved up, though, so. maybe Cleveland is doing the worst right now compared to the other 3 players, but I think it's not a big enough gap that Cleveland can't make it up, depending on how H3 goes. Anyway, Sazmer, instead of finishing the Suez Canal this turn, chooses to play military theory instead. It looks like they're a little bit scared of military, which makes some sense, but they also have the Hussars tactics, so I think if I were Sazmer, I would have finished Suez Canal this turn instead. However, they are at least able to build a second journalism, so they have something to do with their rocks other than Suez Canal, so I can understand this line. I'm still weaker, so I don't siege. However, I am very fortunate to get an early communism. Pretty much the exact thing you want with Robespierre. I mean, it does mean I'll be giving up my first H3 draws, but I think it's definitely worth it to get these additional civil actions. I will say, to get these additional military actions to give me, I was a little bit worried about potentially Sazmer is looking to kind of have a lot of culture soon, as is Fat Hope, so I was a little concerned about like how I was going to win this game. Obviously, there's still a lot of time in H3, but I felt that obviously on Republic, with Sazmer already taking the first copy of military theory, it's a little hard to do a big war on Republic. A lot easier to do a big war on communism. So I definitely was willing to sacrifice those H3 draws in order to get this communism going so early for only the 1 science. As for remaining civil actions, thanks to the patriotism, I'm able to get 1 additional military action to play the cannon to finally not be weakest. And I was also fortunate in that, you know, this weakness of communism, giving me this unhappy face, is fixed immediately with Chaplin. Obviously, Robespierre has already done his job. He's really not providing me with anything anymore except the military action. I would very much prefer to have Chaplin, who is arguably the worst H3 leader in a vacuum, but I think in this situation is maybe the best H3 leader, or at least up there, because he fixes this happy face problem that I was having. And that opera that I took, you know, just in like I said, the only synergy is Chaplin. Well, another thing about Robespierre, obviously, you want to replace Robespierre as fast as you can, so leaving yourself open to as many H3 leaders as possible, very important when you have Robespierre. So in this opera pick, definitely coming back to help me a lot, so I was pretty happy to see that happen. I decided to go ahead and finish upgrading my mines. Again, value that over finishing ocean liner service early, because having population with no resources to spend on them, not where you want to be. With my last civil actions, I take these 2 copy of reserves, just in general, a strong card. I didn't want any of these tech cards either. So I'm pretty happy with this play. I discarded the aggression. I think a tactic, and obviously don't draw anything. Fat Hope Seeds reveals immigration, doesn't affect anyone. Fat Hope builds a cannon and plays a modern army from their hand. Right now it is outdated, but that'll soon change because Fat Hope also takes this modern infantry. There's also reserves. Obviously, Fat Hope pretty struggling with resources right now, so the reserves is going to help a lot there. Cleveland Seeds revealing Ravages of Time. That's the last card you want to see when your first wonder was an H1 wonder, but that's how it goes sometimes. Cleveland is able to upgrade 2 labs thanks to the Louvre resources, and takes Einstein. Understandable leader for them to take even for 3 civil actions, since Cleveland really wants to get these techs out of their hand. They do choose to take another tech though. This, I question. I think the reserves would have been significantly better for them. They also really need the rocks for it, so they already have way too many techs. I disagree with this engineering. So it doesn't seed as their weakest. Instead, they take this multimedia. Perhaps... Yeah, there's not really multimedia synergy, though, so I'm not sure about this. They do, however, finish Suez Canal. Definitely what you want to do. And they... unfortunately, though, Sazmer does not have any colonies. So, without having any colonies for the Suez Canal, it becomes a lot worse. If you think about it, Sazmer is getting 5 rock income per turn with it. However, they had to spend, well, they had the engineering genius in fairness, so they had to spend 8. So basically, they spent 6 civil actions and 8 rocks to get an extra 5 rock income per turn. So it'll take 2 turns before that even gives them any value. And it'll take 3 turns before it's equivalent to, say, a reserves. And a reserves, even if you take it for 3, costs 4 civil actions. This costs 6. So I think even with having all these colonies, I don't think Suez Canal is worth it when you don't have a colony in your hand to feed to it. Anyway, with me not being weakest anymore, I felt safe to finally cede that prosperity. And I reveal Iconoclasm. So this is probably another reason why Cleveland replaced the leader. Definitely, you know, seeing this made me I was pretty lucky that this got revealed after I did the Communism Revolution. In Age 3, so it was able to kill both Nobel and Cook, harming Fat Hope and Sazmer pretty significantly. Anyway, as for my turn, I decided, after playing the Napoleonic army tactic, I can finally finish that ocean line of service and increase my population with it. I decided that let's see. Yeah. And by playing the reserves, I think is that an H2 reserves? Yeah. Played the H2 reserves first, because it'll, in case I want to keep this till the end of the age. By building the cannon now, I am able to become strongest. You'll note that I chose to destroy my Universitas instead of the Himeji Castle, the Ravages of Time. You'll see why at the end of the turn, because I think this all is pretty clear of what to do. The question is what to do with my remaining civil actions. I think there's a few possibilities. Manhattan Project, always something to consider, but I don't have any wars yet, so it felt too risky to take when I haven't drawn any wars. I've definitely had games where I've drawn no wars in Age 3, so I didn't want to take this. I would only want the Manhattan Project if I'm planning to use it for a war. I think the tanks, obviously, the cavalry is the one tech I don't have that's Age 3 tactic infallible. So if I, say, wanted to copy this modern army tactic at some point, I will need the tanks. But at the end of the day, I decided to take these yellow cards instead. The revolutionary ideas in particular seemed too good to pass up to me, with me not having much science income. And so I decided, with me being able to take both of these revolutionary ideas, and with having this one in my hand already, I felt that I didn't need the extra science from the Universitas. So another benefit of taking these revolutionary ideas is it let me keep the Himeji Castle around for potential wars and aggressions later in Age 3. I guess what I should say is, what I just remembered actually, the player was considering as the alternative to building the second cannon was building an opera instead. Obviously, with Chaplain, this opera would be worth 6 culture a turn. I definitely highly considered that. But I felt that building the cannon instead not only let me become strongest, but it also let me take these revolutionary ideas, which struck me as more important than that 6 culture. Although 6 culture is a lot, so I think it's a pretty close decision, actually. This also let me spend my military actions efficiently, letting me still draw 3 cards. And that last card I drew is a war, so happy to see that to give me more options to get some culture. Catch up to Fat Hope and Sazmer. Well, I guess Sazmer, I'm not actually that far behind on them, especially after that Iconoclasm. Sazmer lost a lot of culture income. Fat Hope is only 2 culture income ahead of me, so. Anyway, Fat Hope upgrades 2 modern infantry to now become strongest, get that non-outdated modern army tactic going. With the remaining 2 civil actions takes Pierre as the leader, as well as the last revolutionary idea. Pierre kind of an interesting choice with Fat Hope not having any arenas, but Fat Hope probably figures that they'll be able to get a pro sports with, you know, Cleveland not needing it, and Sazmer. I mean, Sazmer could use the pro sports, frankly, but I might have considered Bill Gates instead, get a little more market income now, and maybe hope that they can get... There's still 2 copies of computers for Bill Gates, potentially in the future. Cleveland Seeds. It was in international negotiations. Unfortunately, I did not win it. Fat Hope did. Cleveland decides to have Sazmer pay 3 food to Fat Hope. This does let Fat Hope pop twice next turn, which is notable because the second population will be happy. So I feel that this is quite good for Fat Hope, and maybe exchanging science, since both players kind of have a lot of science anyway, maybe would have been a better thing for Cleveland to do. Anyway, Cleveland upgrades the final lab, plays that strategy to get some extra strength going, takes a military build-up, strong card, as well as the tanks. Strong card, especially if they want to copy that Hussar's tactic. Fortunately, it is yet another tech that they're stuffing into their hand. And because their hand is full now, they have no choice but to float 3 civil actions, which is really rough. Sazmer plays a rifleman, builds 2. Looks like they have... It looks like they're planning to maybe play or copy a tactic. Perhaps they're planning to copy the Napoleonic army tactic, or the modern army tactic, with taking the rockets too. And they take an oil, which I'm kind of doubtful that they'll be ever play this oil, but it looks like they don't really have anything better to do with this last civil action anyway, so... Maybe it would have been better to float this. It might have been better to float the civil action, though, frankly, because this is stuffing up their hand with a tech they're almost certainly not playing. Anyway, on my turn, I seed... Sorry, I forgot which impact that was. Obviously, the impact of technology didn't look great for me. Anyway, I reveal that prosperity that I seeded. So on my turn, I decided this is the turn that I can afford to bail out Opera, get that extra culture income going. I am now actually have more culture income than my opponents do. I also decided to take the fast food chains. Aside from it and Spaceflight are the only wonders left in the deck. Obviously, Spaceflight's not that great for me. I do have a lot of revolutionary ideas, but on the other hand, you know, obviously one of my opponents could easily take the Spaceflight, especially Cleveland. So I didn't want to leave that with a chance. Fast food chains is a good wonder for me, pretty guaranteed source of culture, and I was feeling pretty good about my chances of winning this game with me having the most culture income, a strong economy going, as well as getting this wonder. For my last civil actions, I decided to also build a knight to compete more in strength, also use my military action efficiently, and I decided to take a multimedia. I didn't, you know... I didn't really have much else to do. I guess the major alternative might have been increasing my population. I decided to use the ocean liner service for the 5 food pop so that I could get rid of all of my food with my next pop. I think maybe in retrospect, efficient upgrade plus pro sports. Did I have hand space for that though? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I had barely enough hand space to take efficient upgrade and pro sports. Obviously, pro sports is really good for Fat Hope right now. So I think that, you know, multimedia, you know, I can upgrade my printing press to it. It's pretty good. The pro sports I don't necessarily need, but it never hurts. You know, a little bit of extra strength at least, and I would get the efficient upgrade with it too. So yeah, I think taking these 2 cards instead would have been better. I draw 2 impacts that I likely won't seed and a bonus card. Fat Hope seeds reveals a historic territory. I do have a lot of bonus cards, so I was willing to bet a fair amount. I didn't want to bet too much though because I was eyeing a war next turn. So this time Fat Hope is able to win it. They do have to put 2 units into it though. They take that pro sports and an urban growth for it. Rebuilds them on an infantry to get that tactic going again, and plays Pierre even though he's not doing anything for Fat Hope this turn. They probably didn't want to spend a civil action on any of these cards. efficient upgrade could be used to upgrade one of these, but maybe at this point they were figuring I'm not upgrading them regardless, which it is true. Upgrading them, especially the mine at this point, really does nothing for them. They get like, what, 2 extra rocks out of it. Cleveland plays that tanks and the military build up for 6 to upgrade some tanks, get that full power Hussars tactic going, as well as takes 2 more techs. I mean, it is true that they have the computers, you know, pretty good with Einstein, but still, that's a lot of techs in their hand. They're able to get strongest at least. Sazmer destroys a temple in order to be able to take Mandela for 1 civil action, and is able to build a rocket, takes the reserves, and we can see now they have the second modern army tactic in their hand that they're able to play. It is outdated though, but they are able at least to compete in strength now. Before we go to my turn, I'll say right now, I decided to war. Obviously, this Air Forces will be available to me that I can use along with the reserves to get 2 of them and go up to a lot of strength. My question was who to war, and I spent a fair amount of time on it because it's not immediately obvious. I won't go through each and every detail, but on a broad note, I will be able to win a pretty decisive war against most of my opponents unless they get help from the event deck. Specifically, I was scared of this H2 event, where, for example, Fat Hope right now is missing 1 rock to build an Air Forces. However, if this event is arms industry or economic progress, neither of which I have knowledge of, then obviously Fat Hope could build an Air Force and get a huge amount of additional strength. Similar things happen with my opponents, where Cleveland with additional rocks could get more Air Forces. Sazmer, for example, could get an Air Force or the second copy of tanks to get a non-outdated modern army tactic going, and maybe with additional help from the event deck and stuff. So basically, without help from the event deck, I can beat any of my opponents in a war, but if this card gives rocks or science or something, things get a lot dicier. As for who I am basically competing against, I mean, Fat Hope and Sazmer maybe have this literally about the same amount of culture. Fat Hope has a little bit more than Sazmer does. Cleveland is behind. So when it comes to, like, you know, who am I competing against to make sure it doesn't win, it's probably Fat Hope, but at this point, especially with me having this wonder, I look very likely to win no matter who I war. So I was mostly just concerned with ensuring I can win the war. And that's why I ended up deciding to war Fat Hope, because Fat Hope is playing next. And like I said, my main concern is that this event might give out rocks or something. And Fat Hope, I figure, is the least... Fat Hope has the potential to not have an event at all. Even if they do, maybe they don't want to seed the event. So by warring Fat Hope, I give myself the least chance of revealing a card from the event deck that will help Fat Hope out. In addition, Fat Hope, because they're playing next, there's the least amount of chance I'm taking this. This is actually the first copy of Air Forces. All 3 of them waited until the very end of the deck. But there's also a chance that an Air Force will not be revealed on Fat Hope's turn. So combining the chance that Air Forces will not be revealed on Fat Hope's turn with the chances that Fat Hope doesn't have an event they want to seed, combined with the chances that this isn't even a rock event in the first place, I thought that warring Fat Hope gave me the highest chances of getting a big war. Anyway, I am very easily able to get those 2 Air Forces going, and with my remaining 2 civil actions, Engineering Genius seemed pretty clearly the right card to take. So Fat Hope, we can see, indeed does not have an event to seed. Instead, they have an international tourism that they offered to me, kinda hilariously, right after I decided to war them, but it does make sense. Fat Hope figures that, probably figured at this point that, they wouldn't be able to beat me. And I also obviously have, well, I have an equal amount of wonders completed with Cleveman, but by offering it to a player who plays first, Fat Hope will get one more turn out of the pact than I will. So basically, Fat Hope will get 3 more culture from it than me. I decided to accept it because I figured with me getting this big war against Fat Hope will definitely not be able to overtake me in points. So I'll get a little bit of an extra point cushion in case Sazmo or Cleveman managed to pull off something. Cleveman in particular, maybe with the space flight, could get, you know, a fair amount of culture from that. Anyway, Fat Hope plays the military theory and takes up patriotism and decides to build 2 warriors instead of wait, they lacked a rock, so they built 2 warriors instead of, say, cavalryman, which kind of surprised me. I wasn't sure why. Maybe there's a freedom of movement in the deck or something. And so Cleveman, I was expecting the game to end after Cleveman's turn, but Cleveman actually decides to do a revolution instead, thus extending the game for another run of turns, which I was pretty surprised by. Anyway, Sazmo Seeds, turns out I didn't have to worry about this event at all. It was an international agreement. Sazmo takes the second copy of First Sports. It is a good card for them. And disbands the Knights to build 2. I was a little surprised about this. I'm not sure, because, well, I guess with Mandela, yeah, that makes sense. Age 4 begins. I sacrifice one of my swordsmen to the Magic Castle. I sacrificed the swordsman and not an air forces because I wasn't planning on rebuilding any of my units. And so obviously sacrificing the swordsman still leaves me with 2 armies plus 2 air forces. So that I could potentially use this armed intervention next turn. Sacrificing the swordsman to the Magic Castle lets me steal a total of 24 culture from Fat Hope. I decided to use the international agreement instead of ceding this turn because I think none of these impacts are particularly good for me. These yellow cards I will indeed actually be able to use this turn pretty usefully. With the last international agreement, take the civil service strictly as a denial. With the revolutionary ideas, I'm able to play the multimedia and use the efficient upgrade on it. And after destroying a lab, I am able to build a second theater with the urban growth that I took. Well, while still leaving me with the engineering genius and the reserves, enough rocks to finish the fast food chains next turn. I didn't want to use the ocean liner service anymore because that would put me in famine. And with my last 2 civil actions, I take the rockets because I'll have enough rocks to upgrade, I think, at least 1 cannon to rockets next turn. So it was, of these techs, it was the only one that seemed at all useful to me. I won't have enough science for movies. Maybe I have taken the upgrading the movies would have given me as much culture as upgrading the multimedia, and upgrading the multimedia is better for impacts because, like, impact of balance specifically. Fat Hope is able to build 2 arenas with Pierre. Luckily, oh wait, actually, when did Fat Hope activate Pierre? Oh wait, Fat Hope actually, yeah, Fat Hope unfortunately activated Pierre immediately after I declared war against them. So unfortunate timing. Anyway, they decide to build another Modern Infantry. Cleveland sees and does reveal that impact of balance that I mentioned. Thanks to my upgrading the multimedia, I am able to at least be about as much as my opponents with it. Upgrades 1 computers and knights, and then take some techs. Final turn, Sazmo Seeds reveals an impact of strength. Yeah, that was the impact I seeded, so obviously a great impact for me. Upgrades 2 multimedias, blows away from them, takes tanks and air forces. I didn't want to seed any of these impacts, so I just did the armed intervention, especially thanks to Magic Castle. I can sack my air forces to the armed intervention to get additional culture for it, and I don't think it guaranteed that I would win the aggression, but it more or less did. Anyway, I have enough rocks, like I said, to both build a farm. This farm helps both for impact of harmony and for impact of agriculture. For impact of agriculture, it gets me above consumption, so it gives me an extra 4 culture if someone's needed impact of agriculture. And I can upgrade 1 rocket in case of impact of competition. And then finish the fast food change for 25 culture. Fat Hope Seeds reveals politics of strength. Unfortunately, because I sacked that air forces, I do not end up winning it. Fat Hope builds a 3rd arena, and that's it. Cleveland finally plays the engineering and is able to use it, plus the last blue token from Louvre to build a movie. So with the final impacts, you can take a look at the culture. Thanks to the wonder and the war and, you know, me ending up with a pretty huge amount of culture income too, I by far have the most culture, so I'm definitely going to win this game. Fat Hope will probably end up taking second, looks like. Although it's, you know, with having 20 culture more than their opponents, although maybe there's a set of impacts that could let Cleveland or something win, especially if there's impact of science in there. Maybe a Cleveland could get second. But we'll see what happens. The first impact is the impact of population. That one actually helps me the most, which is a little funny. I definitely don't need it. Next is that impact of harmony that I mentioned before. So building that 3rd farm helped me with that one. Fat Hope still clear in second. Next is impact of happiness. This one really is bad for Cleveland and not any of the opponents. So now is looking like to be a race between Cleveland and Sasmo for 3rd and 4th. Fat Hope is pretty solidly in second. Next is impact of wonders. That one gives 12 to Cleveland and 8 to Sasmer. So Cleveland is now 5 points ahead of Sasmer. And the final impact is that impact of science that I mentioned, and that helps Cleveland a lot, so that lands Cleveland solidly in 3rd, 13 points behind Fat Hope, and 10 points out of Sasmer. So my 3 opponents are all relatively close, but I got a pretty dominating victory in this one. Overall, I'm pretty satisfied with how I played this game. I did mention that there were a few mistakes that I made that I pointed out. A few of them I definitely should have caught too, especially that not taking the Colossus, and I think there was 1 or 2 others. However, I think this game, for me, really shows the power of Robespierre. Robespierre, I won't say single-handedly won me this game, but I'd say he was the single biggest reason I won this game. Not only getting me that Republic going, but that really quick communism in Age 3 to get me a little bit of extra rocks, but more importantly, the military actions to get me that war. I ended up not needing the war to win, but it gave me a cushion. And just overall, I think I played a pretty nice, you know, balanced game where I had just enough culture income for my printing press and my wonders to be able to have about as much culture as Sasmo and Fat Hope did entering Age 3, thus letting my economy that I got from the coal mines and the communism really take me over the top. Cleveland, I think the major mistake they made was stuffing their hand with text. That really hurt them as the game went on. Sasmo, I think, made some mistakes in the early game that was mentioned, especially that 3rd farm, and you know, and the Suez Canal. I think, even though it seems really good, when you don't have that colony in your hand, Suez Canal I think is really not good. Fat Hope overall played a pretty good game, I think, though ending the game, as we can see, not having finished upgrading the mines or the labs, not a great sign. I think Fat Hope should have prioritized these instead of the Eiffel Tower. Fat Hope had upgraded these first and then finished the Eiffel Tower. Maybe things would have gone differently. Still, though, overall, like I said, always good to win the first game in a World Championship group, but one game is only one game. Anything can still happen. So I need to stay on my game and hopefully continue doing well in the next ones. I definitely plan on covering at least all of those in this group. Again, no promises. We'll see how I feel, but that's my current plans. Thank you a lot for watching this video, my first video in a long time. And I hope you look forward to the next one.